What would Martin Luther King say if he saw Michael Brown's body lying lifeless on the asphalt of Ferguson, while the entire sky seemed to hold back the world's tears? What would he say if he witnessed the cries stuck in throats, suffocated by tear gas, muffled by shields, ignored by a system that has learned for centuries not to listen? Do you feel that? Because I do. His blood has yet to dry on the pavement of history. It still flows. It flows when a black boy enters a market and is followed by eyes that do not see his humanity. It flows when a black woman changes her tone of voice in the office to be heard as acceptable. It flows when silence answers the call for justice. Martin Luther King would see this blood, and he would not look away. He would ask, how many times does a people need to die to prove they are alive? Do you really think he would remain silent? Martin Luther King did not come into the world to please. He did not march to negotiate with cowardice. He did not dream to be remembered as a pretty picture on a wall. He came to disturb. And if he were here now, walking the streets of Ferguson, sweet words would not come from his mouth. It would be truth. And truth hurts. Can you imagine what it is like to wake up every day afraid of being mistaken for a threat? Do you know what it is like to go out to buy a snack and end up with 6 bullets in your body because the uniform of authority decided you did not deserve the benefit of the doubt? King would see this. He would look at Michael Brown not as a statistic, not as a headline. He would see a boy, a son, a dream that did not have time to bloom, and then he would look at the police officer. And he would not shout. He would ask, who taught you to fear dark skin? Who convinced you that protecting means shooting first? What happens to the soul of a man when he pulls the trigger, thinking he is cleaning the streets and not destroying families? Martin Luther King would not ask for calm. He would demand awareness, because calm without justice is anesthesia for the wounded soul. He would remind us that every time justice fails, revolt is born, and that there is no fire in the streets more dangerous than the fire of omission that consumes this system from its foundations. Have you ever wondered how many mothers buried their children before Michael Brown? Have you ever tried to listen to the silence that comes after the gunshot? The silence of absence. Because it's not just life that's lost. The future goes too, the smile goes, the hug goes. And what remains? A police report, a statement, a cold verdict, a system that says, there is not enough evidence. King would call this institutionalized violence. He would speak of it as someone talks about an open wound, and he would know that this wound stinks, because racism stinks. And when it becomes public policy, it stinks even more. It stinks when it dresses in impartiality, when it pretends neutrality, when it hides prejudice behind a uniform, a robe, a diploma. Do you feel anger? You should, because he would. But he wouldn't let this anger explode in destruction. He would say that true strength lies in transforming that anger into movement. Not into chaos, but into a march. Not into revenge, but into memory. He would remind us that non-violence is not passivity. It's courage. It's confrontation. It's saying, even when they push me, I stay standing. Because the world needs to see me standing. Martin Luther King would look at the jury that acquitted the officer and ask, how much evidence do you need? A camera in the sky? A scream on the ground? A history of abuse is not enough. What do you want? That the dead resurrect and tell his version. He would speak of it as someone who is tired. Because he would be tired. Not out of resignation, but because carrying the weight of truth when the world insists on living in lies is exhausting. It is exhausting to see the same pattern. It is exhausting to repeat the same names. Trayvon Martin, Tamir Rice, Breonna Taylor, George Floyd. Exhausting, but he would not stop. He would walk with the protesters, hold their hands. He would protect those who pray, those who cry, those who march. And he would stand between them and the shields, and he would stand between the bullet and the body. Because to him, black lives have always mattered. He would see a spark in the eyes of the young man in a hoodie, not of fear, but of legacy. And he would understand, it's not enough to die. Someone needs to live to carry on. Michael Brown is not coming back. But what he represents still pulsates. It still occupies the streets. It still provokes responses. Martin Luther King knew that death does not silence the truth. It only gives it more reason to shout. And when he looked at this city in pieces, he would not seek reconciliation without accountability. He would not ask for peace without listening. He would say, Before rebuilding, we need to face the rubble. Do you see the rubble? Do you care about those buried in it? Do you think time heals? King would say that time only heals if there is repentance. Without truth, time just repeats. He would turn his eyes to the white people who say, "This doesn't concern me," and say, "Racism doesn't need your hate. It survives on your silence." He would call religious leaders, pastors, priests, rabbis, and say, "Where is your faith when injustice comes through the front door?" He would look at businessmen, politicians, teachers, and ask, "What are you teaching? That black lives are footnotes in history?" He would spare no one, because he knew either we all march together for justice or we all fall together in inhumanity. And you? Where are you in this march? Behind? Ahead? Or pretending it doesn't pass by your street? Martin Luther King would not accept tributes while mothers are crying. He would not accept statues while there are bodies on the ground. He would demand that his name be a verb, an act. He did not want to be remembered. He wanted to be followed. Michael Brown was a boy, but he was also a symbol, a spark, a response, an endless question. And King would not rest. Because there is no rest while there is even one young black person who leaves home and does not know if they will return. Do you understand now? It's not just about Michael Brown, it's about all of us. It's about how many more times this scenario will repeat until someone says enough. Martin Luther King already said it. The question is, did you listen? Martin Luther King would look straight into the eyes of the crowd, and he would not ask for permission to speak. He would speak because it is impossible to be silent when injustice screams. He would speak because silence, when lives are being taken, is complicity. And he would speak looking at you, yes, at you, because it's no longer enough to just point a finger at the system and forget that the system is made of people. And people need to choose. Either you feed the structure that kills, or you help build one that welcomes. King never believed in neutrality. He knew that those who remain silent in the face of pain are not impartial, they are convenient. He would call this convenience disguised as impartiality by its name. He would strip it down piece by piece until revealing what is really behind it: fear, complacency, and often selfishness. He would ask, "How many more need to die before you feel something?" And the worst part, he would say, is not the bullet. It's after the bullet. It's the coldness of the forensic examination. It's the ready-made justification. It's the discourse of he was not a saint. It's the autopsy that tries to erase humanity. It's the news that turns a boy into a threat. It's the public opinion that wants to find in the dead person the blame for their own death. Martin Luther King would face this with heavy eyes, not from fatigue but from depth. He has seen this cycle before. He saw it with Emmett Till. He saw it with the 4 boys killed in the Birmingham church. He saw it with Malcolm. He saw it with Medgar. He saw it with himself, and he would see it with Michael Brown, and with everyone after him. Can you bear to hear this? Because he would speak even if it hurt, especially because it hurts. He would tear off the masks. Because racism isn't invisible. It just learned to hide. It hides in words. It hides in rejected resumes. It hides in police stops. It hides in ambiguous compliments. It hides in the question, "Where are you from again?" It hides in the stare that looks through without seeing. It hides in the phrase, "I don't see color." King would see color, and he would say, "Seeing color isn't the problem. The problem is when color defines who can breathe, who can run, who can exist." He would speak with a choking voice but firmly, because he never spoke only with his mouth. He spoke with his body, with his chest open, with his spirit bright, with a soul that refused to accept the unacceptable. He knew the price of freedom, and he paid with his life. And he would ask you now, what are you willing to lose so that another can gain dignity? Because the fight has never been comfortable. It scratches, it bleeds, it charges, but it also liberates. And he would say, are you on the side of the one who holds the whip or the one who breaks the chains? Because the middle ground is an illusion. Either you fight racism or in some way you support it. Martin Luther King would stand between those who are afraid and those who make others afraid, and not to mediate, but to reveal. He would say that police violence against blacks is not an isolated case. It is the rule. And when the exception happens, everyone rushes to say, see, it's not always like that, and he would retort, and why can't it always be like that? He would look at the institutions, at those who call themselves just, at those who call themselves civilized, and he would ask, "Where was your civility when the boy lay on the ground for 4 hours? Where was your justice when the mother had to learn from the TV that her son was dead? Where was your system when the policeman went home and the body was still there in the summer heat, in front of the eyes of an entire community?" Have you ever stopped to imagine what it's like to have the ground of your street marked with the blood of someone who looked like you? Someone who could be your son, your brother, your neighbor? Martin Luther King knew what this kind of mourning was. The mourning that never ends. The mourning that sticks to the skin, and he would say, "Do not expect these people to stop shouting. The scream is all that is left when justice is gone." And yet, he would speak of love, not passive love, but love that shames, that pushes for change, that unsettles those who are comfortable, love that asks for nothing in return, that refuses to hate even with all the reasons to do so. And that love is not weakness, it is revolution. Can you love when everything around you tries to dehumanize you? King believed you could, because that was how he won, with words, with marches, with hugs, with persistence, with faith. He believed that within every person, no matter how blind they were, there was still a spark. And the mission was to fan that spark until it became a flame. But fanning is tiring, and he would know that today, so many years later, we are still tired. And he would honor that fatigue. He would say that there is power in the silent resistance of a black mother who continues to raise her children in a world that insists on seeing them as a threat. He would exalt the steadfastness of a father who teaches his son that he can be anything, even knowing that the world will try to convince him otherwise. Martin Luther King would look at the protests in Ferguson and see more than just revolt. He would see hope, hope covered in dust, sweat, and tears, raw hope. And he would say, "They still believe it is worth fighting for. They still believe they can turn pain into seeds. They still believe, and because of that I also believe." He would know that the enemy is not just the police officer. It's the system that formed him. It's the fear that shaped him. It's the structure that protects him. And King would not attack the man. He would attack the invisible monster that inhabits him. He wouldn't burn buildings. He would set consciences on fire. Because in the end, what he wanted was not revenge, it was reconciliation. But true reconciliation. The kind that is only possible when the truth is told, pain is acknowledged, and justice is served. And if you thought he was just a peacemaker, you were wrong. He was fire. Fire that warms those who tremble, but also burns those who pretend not to feel. And that fire still burns, because his dream is still alive, and so is the nightmare that killed him. The nightmare still lives. And Martin Luther King would not ignore that. He would walk among the people as someone who feels every inch of their pain in his own skin. He would know that time has not healed anything, that the wound that killed in 1963 still kills in 2025. It has just changed its clothes. It has become more cynical, more smiling, more polite in its words, but still carries the same intention: to deny humanity. He would look at all this without surprise, because he already knew. He always knew. And maybe you knew too, but chose to forget. King would never forget. He would keep his eyes open even when the whole world preferred to close theirs. He would walk among those who cry and would not offer empty promises. He would not say it will pass. He would ask, "What will you do while it hasn't passed?" Can you face this question? Because it's not light, it's sharp. It cuts through the comfort. It reveals who you are when no one is looking. And that's what King would do to you. He wouldn't let you escape your part in this story. Because every silence has an impact. Every choice not to get involved has a consequence. And he wouldn't soften that. Martin Luther King would look at every face walking in fear and say, "You are not the problem. The problem is the gaze that doesn't see you. It's the finger that accuses you without knowing your name. It's the bullet that hits you before listening to you." And he would make you understand that it's not your color that bothers them. It's what your color resists. It's what your color carries. It's what your color challenges. He would call you brother, not like someone repeating a nice speech, but like someone who sees beyond the surface, like someone who understands that brotherhood is only real when the other is recognized with the same value. He wouldn't protect you from the truth. He would put you inside it, because he believed that only the truth sets you free, even when it hurts, especially when it hurts. And he would speak firmly when he saw the disdain that drips from the mouths of those who justify deaths with statistics, of those who look at black pain and ask, what about the others? Those who confuse protest with threat. Those who say this has already been resolved. King wouldn't let it pass. He would call it by its name: cowardice, moral laziness, selective injustice. Have you ever felt like you were screaming in an empty room? Like your voice only echoed? Like no one really wanted to hear you? Martin Luther King would listen, because he knew that the scream that comes from oppression is not hysteria. It is survival. And he would translate that scream with words that disturb, that penetrate, that don't fit in a tweet or a nice podium speech. He would walk through white, cold rooms, full of power, and would ask, where were you when Michael Brown's body fell? Where were you when justice failed once again? Where were you when his mother collapsed on the sidewalk? He would demand an answer, and not just any answer. He would demand that each one recognize the place they occupy, because racism only persists because many pretend they have nothing to do with it. And when they spoke of peace, he would stop. He would close his eyes and say, you confuse peace with order, order with silence, silence with acceptance. He would remind them that there is no peace where there is inequality, that there is no tranquility in a place where a black man cannot run, or walk, or sleep, without being seen as suspicious, that there is no reconciliation without reparation. King would make you feel. He would not spare the heart. He would not give you data. He would give you faces, stories. He would bring the name of each one that was erased. And he would make a point to repeat, to tell who they were, what they liked, what music they listened to, how they laughed. Because he knew that racism begins when a person becomes a number, and the cure begins when the number returns to being a person. Do you remember Michael Brown as a boy, as someone with fear, with desire, with plans, or just as that case in Ferguson? Martin Luther King would refuse to let him be just a case. He would kneel on that hot asphalt where Michael fell and say, here lies more than a body. Here lies proof that the dream has not yet been fulfilled. He would look at those who say racism is a thing of the past and would ask, then why do bodies still fall? Why do mothers still cry? Why do eyes still avert when a dark-skinned person enters the room? Why do the numbers show that skin color still determines who has a better chance of living, working, being heard? What if you tried to respond with ready-made phrases? He wouldn't let you. He would interrupt. He would raise his hand and say, the answer doesn't come from comfort. The answer comes from confrontation. Confront your history. Confront your privileges. Confront what you never had to think about, because King knew that those who never had to fight to be recognized do not understand the weight of being unseen. He would talk about those who came before us, those who marched without knowing if they would return home, those who took beatings without retaliating, those who refused to hate even with their bodies marked. He would remind us that it was on their shoulders that he stood, and now it's our turn to carry the struggle. He would point his finger in our direction and ask, what are you doing with what you inherited? There would be no poetry in his words now, there would be urgency, and he would speak with unblinking eyes, unwavering, because he would see the protests, the pain, the resistance, as a continuation of the same calling he responded to, and he wouldn't ask for an audience, he would call for participants, because he never wanted applause, he wanted change. And when tired eyes met, he would say, I know it's hard. I know it's lonely. I know it feels like nothing changes. But it is in this moment that it is most important to continue. Because the darkest night is when the light needs to shine. He knew that hope is not born from the result. Hope is born from commitment. Have you ever committed to something that costs you? Martin Luther King committed to a country that killed him, but he did not die in vain. He died planting. And we are the soil, do you understand? We are the soil, and either we make the dream sprout or we continue burying bodies. He would be on the front line, not in the cameras, not in the editorials, but on the ground, next to those who resist, next to those who are ignored, next to those who still believe that love can transform even when everything says it cannot. And when no one else believed, he would be there, with open arms, with an exposed chest, with the right words. Harsh, necessary. He would look at you as if he sees you entirely, and he would say, "Continue." Because as long as there is a voice saying, "Enough," the dream still breathes. You know that it's no longer possible to live pretending that this is normal. You can't keep crossing the street of conscience just because the topic is uncomfortable. The truth is that racism doesn't disappear when you choose to ignore it. It grows. And when you don't take a stand, someone dies on the other side of the silence. So look inside now and answer me. How long will you let the color of someone's skin decide the value of their life? You who are here listening to me have a choice in your hands. It's not about being a hero, it's about being human. It's not about saving anyone, it's about stopping supporting what kills. You don't need to understand everything, you just need to stop pretending that you don't see, because now that you have seen, there is no turning back. Either you help change this, or you accept that you are choosing to let everything stay the same.